Hey everyone, welcome to Patriot Resell Box, where I give you my commentary on this today as reported by the Wall Street Journal. Before we get into it today, though, first I want to say tomorrow I will not be doing a video because Thanksgiving, and I also am stopping my Sunday videos, just to let you all know. So I say daily that I have daily content, I mean except for Sunday. First up, the cover picture is, the usual holiday debacle of travel because when everybody's traveling a lot more than usual, they try to pack a whole bunch of people onto planes. Inevitably, problems arise like delays and whatnot. But what compounded the problem was that there's a lot that throughout the country, especially in the north, there's been a lot of snow, a lot of storms, whatnot, which leads to even more misery for travelers. Maybe they should just drive or stay at home for Thanksgiving. Who needs to What, do we really need to go see other relatives, or can we just stay home and have turkey and stuffing and pumpkin pie? Can't we? Then there's article says U.S. companies are propping up China's surveillance network because the tools that China is using, like a lot of their tech is American tech, and so and China is often criticized by U.S. policymakers for stealing American tech. And the way it happens is that as part of requirements for doing business in China, they're often a lot companies often have to like share intellectual property with the Chinese or something like that. And so China is able to sneak in and steal the like blueprints and or actual hardware. And also a lot of it is made in China, so I mean it would be almost impossible for China not to see what they're doing, and then and they just use it to for their own stuff. And then apparently adversity, in quotes of course, has a big effect on SAT scores. Like there's a graph showing like generally better schools have where people have better SAT scores. Which they say that they suggest that maybe they should weight SAT scores for like depending on how good or not a school is, which I think is a dumb idea. Because first of all, like yeah, most of the schools follow that trend, but there are quite a few outliers that do not follow the trend according to the graph. And second of all, it should be up to it should be the fault of the students if they don't do well. I mean, like just because your school sucks doesn't mean you can't not be prepared for the SAT. You can learn it yourself. You can learn and study yourself. I think the College Board actually does provide like study books and whatnot for you, and practice tests. And then finally, of course, students in better schools are gonna do better than students in crappy schools because they're the ones learning anything. I mean, yeah, it's up to them, the students, ultimately, to whether or not they learn, but still, it's still ultimately up to the students, right? So yeah, I think focusing on adversity in education is a really, really bad idea. Then then on the issue of elections, there's there's sort of there's what's known in DC as the suburban candidate school for Republicans. Uh, Politicians or prospective politicians will go to this if they want to run on the Republican ticket, so they can learn how to appeal to suburban voters. Like one common question that's asked there is, what do I say to people when they ask about Trump? Because like even if you're not even the Republicans who are running for like Congress or for the state legislature, they're inevitably the topic of Trump will come up simply because of the fact that he's president, and also he's a much more controversial president than previous ones. I mean, arguably Obama was the same, but still, we're in an age where the president sort of has his sort of is everywhere, so it only makes sense. And the most common response that they get the schools they say like just say something like, "I joined the first lady wishing he wouldn't tweet as much, but I like a lot of his policies." So Trump's personal style, not the best, but as far as like, is he a good politician, a good businessman? Absolutely. I mean, he gets the job done. He does good policies. So it doesn't matter like saying like, yeah, personal style, not so much, but policy wise, fantastic. Then Mike Bloomberg is currently battling the IRS over what's going like while he's trying to campaign. Apparently, the there's a court case going on between his company Bloomberg News and the IRS over financial data, like arguing basically over deductions and whatnot. So I wonder if Democrats are criticizing President Trump over not releasing his tax returns, or are going to get pissed at Bloomberg with his stuff. I mean, they've already started criticizing Bloomberg. Like AOC and Bernie, I believe, are saying that. Maybe even Warren actually are saying that that Bloomberg's trying to buy the election, which I can see where they're coming from because he's spending the whole thing himself. He's like paying for the whole thing himself. But then again, Bernie Sanders and AOC are still trying to raise campaign money for their own campaign. So it's not that different per se. I mean, they're getting their money from donations. Bloomberg has his money from business, so it's like they're still using money that they got from other people one way or another to fund their campaign. So, I mean, they can't really bash him like that. They just hate rich people. Or, I actually don't think Bernie Sanders hates rich people at all because he's a millionaire himself. I think he just claims to hate rich people because it helps him because it's whatever it'll take to get him in power, right? That's what politicians are after. Like they're after ultimately re-election or election if haven't won that office yet. Because if they're not elected or re-elected, then they can't do anything. Like they can promise all the stuff they want. They can pork barrel and do stuff for their constituency all they want. But if they don't win, then none of that matters. None of it. And if they don't run for re-election, they're a lame duck. I mean, if you remember the House of Representatives, your term expires every 2 years, so people can just wait around. So, your opponents can just wait around until you're out of office. And then, let's see. Well, yes, elections. Whenever someone loses an election these days, always foreign interference. Guess who's the latest crier of that? None other than China, who I think would be the one interfering in elections. And by the way, like when Democrats complain about the U.S., about Russia, or now Ukraine, I guess, meddling in American elections, just remember, the U.S. meddled in elections all throughout the Cold War, and maybe even still does now, we just don't know about it, to make sure that communist candidates in Europe lost because they didn't want those countries falling to the Soviet Union. So just so you know, it's not like America's innocent here. America has blood in its hands too, so to speak. But China's pissed because the anti-China party in Hong Kong won a majority of the district council seats, and so they're claiming foreign interference. They want to it's not like they've said they're not going to change their strategy of trying to bully him around much. So really, the vote doesn't mean a whole lot, except it just shows that what we already know, Hong Kong doesn't like what's currently going on. Then, let's see. Over to the op-ed section, we see there's one article by "Why Are College Students So Afraid of Me" by Heather McDonald, saying that one thing she's learned, because she goes around speaking to colleges, and one thing she's learned is that students don't like being told that they're not oppressed. Which is really odd if you think about it. You think you want to feel as not oppressed as possible so you can succeed, because that's sort of the first step for success. The idea that to succeed you have to first believe that no one's holding you down. That it's actually possible to succeed, right? I mean that just makes sense. But it's but they've been conditioned by really the entire education system to think they're oppressed because. To you conservatives and libertarians who think leftists are stupid, but at least they're not stupid. Well, at least the people like the elite leftists, they're not dumb exactly. They know exactly what they're doing. Part of the reason there's so many liberals in the education system and leftists because they're trying to get a stronghold on that because that means that they have the power to educate the next generations and can swing them over to their side. Academia as a whole has always been pretty liberal because it's typically academics are more of the they're more likely to visualize what can be think what's wrong think of what's wrong with society, how can we fix it, that sort of idyllic thinking. So for much of history, I mean, the academics have been pretty liberal, but they've never been they've never been or at least the majority of them haven't been this nihilist. Sure, the people who currently run universities and the education system, they've been around as long as there's been universities. These people are oppressing you, nothing means anything, whatever. That's been around since there's been universities. But they haven't been dominant. Usually it's been the more idyllic kind of liberals, the ones more optimistic. But yeah, so So they accused McDonald of sexism, racism, and homophobia for daring to suggest that students at colleges are not oppressed. And really, if you think about it, they aren't, because you're at college, something that costs like a fortune to go to, and like typically the students like the best and the brightest out of the classes, because even if you can afford college, that doesn't mean you're gonna get in. You could be dumb as a post. So these students are clearly bright. They're clearly doing well. So they're among the most privileged on earth, arguably, but they've been conditioned to think they're not. So yeah, it's pretty smart of the political left to want to control the education system, because then they can essentially be recruiters. Yes, and the one university where this happened wasn't like it's not the only one that's happened to her or to other speakers, and it's really kind of sad thing about it, because university is supposed to be like a bastion of tolerance, debate, free thinking, and that kind of stuff. I mean, universities actually were enemies of the government in Europe for a while, because the government tried to impose their own rigid way of thinking. Universities were typically a little more libertine than that and wanted to think and debate. And so yeah, typically universities have always been at odds with whoever's in charge, because they offer a different way of thinking. But now they want to think only one way, which is really, really kind of odd. And finally, in an article that references the fact that on December 14th, the Army Navy football game will take place. It talks about how, because that's not the only Army Navy contest, like who's gonna win the football game. The other one that happens much more often, that also happens annually, is the debate over who gets what part of the budget. Like initially, when it was just the Army and the Navy, with the Air Force, when it was first created, was the Army Air Corps under the Army, and then the Marines were part of and the Coast Guard part of the Navy. But then the Coast Guard and the Marines became their own thing, but they're still pretty closely affiliated with the Navy, and then the Air Force became its own thing. But for a while, the budget's pretty evenly split, with the Marines just being part of the Navy's budget, because they're still kind of under the Navy. But now they don't. Like the amount of money that the Navy gets is like not nearly enough to fund the Navy. So in 2016, the Department of Defense under Obama, so they said they were trying to review like how big the U.S. fleet currently was, what ships were in it, and whether it's too much or too little to meet the U.S.'s needs. They figured out that at minimum Navy need 355 ships to like maintain its global commitments. Just 355. But to reduce global risk down to low levels, you need to bump it up to 653. So about 298 more ships than the minimum. However, the current number right now is only 291 ships, with only 148 currently at sea. That's well below the minimum number, and obviously even farther below the keep global risk down to a minimum number. And so and the problem with that is if we have the U.S., like one of the greatest advantages about the United States and why it was able to sit out on the sidelines for the world wars for so long until it was finally forced to enter both of them. For the U.S., the last straw was Germany trying to get Mexico to invade America, and for World War II is Japan bombing Pearl Harbor. Like that was the last straw, and they finally said, "Okay, we're going to war." But part of the benefit is two big oceans on either side of the United States: Pacific off the west coast and Atlantic off the east coast. So and the fact that Canada and Mexico for much of their history have been U.S. allies, or at least like somewhat friends. It's not like they pose that much of a threat, so relatively safe. But then again, if our neighbors are pretty safe, like we don't really need a big army to deter them, then we need a big navy to to get the army elsewhere around the world, so it can actually mean something instead of having the army hold up in the United States. But with only 291 ships, there's not a whole lot of boats to go around to carry troops elsewhere. I mean, yeah, you can use planes, but by far ships are better at carrying cargo and troops than planes. They can carry more of them, and even they can carry more of them, and planes can't carry as many tanks in one load. Like maybe like a couple of tanks, or even just one. Or is it both? Here, several. Sort of the real contest we need to be having right now is, like, not the football game. Well, the football game's nice, but a real one we should be doing is letting the Navy win the battle for budget so the U.S. military can actually do something. All right, that's it for today's episode of Patriot vs. Soapbox. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great daily content.